Gather round, children, long after wait. There'll be fun and adventure for all. Story time with Cait. A world of imagination is there for you to take. All you gotta do is listen. It's story time with Cait. It's story time with Cait.
Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to Story Time with Cait. That's me. Farming edition. And here's Dave the farmer. Dave, I just want to thank you for having us here at your beautiful farm today. And I was wondering, what would you consider to be the toughest thing about farming? Is it difficult at all? Or is it just fun all the time? What's up?
Well, you got to get up real early in the morning. You got to feed, you got to water, you got to take care of the crops. It never ends. I can guarantee you that. Matter of fact, I got a few things I got to do right now, if you don't mind.
Hey, by all means, do what you got to do.
Sure thing. You all have a good time.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, got myself a new hat. So, today's book is called Behind the Barn Door. Written by Jane Sheffer, illustrated by Duff Luder. And I also want to point out that this book actually won an award. It's called the Living Now Book Awards. Books for Better Living. So that's pretty cool. If you want to pick up your very own copy of this book, all you need to do is go to Amazon.com, type in Behind the Barn Door, only with your parents' permission, kids. And now let's get to reading. Behind the Barn Door. Written by Jane Sheffer, illustrated by Duff Luder. Greg, where are you? Marcy could not find her foster brother anywhere inside the house. She went outside to continue her search. As Marcy neared the chicken barn, she heard giggling. She quietly walked to the barn door and slowly opened it. There was Greg, shucking corn from a cob and tossing the kernels to the chickens. He was laughing at the chickens as they fought over the corn. Hey Greg, you need to let someone know where you are. Mom and I were getting worried when we couldn't find you. Do you want to take a walk with me to visit Mr. Oliver? Mom said it's okay. Greg lived... Look at that with the rooster there. Do you guys want to hear me do, real quick, a cock-a-doodle-doo noise? This is my impression of a rooster. Ready? Or if you prefer, cock-a-doodle-doo! Anyway. There he is again. Greg lifted his eyebrows in curiosity. Sorry, Marcy. What's in the bag? Watermelon. What's it for? He asked. You'll see, said Marcy. Mom told Oliver you're from the city and that you don't know much about farm animals. Do you want to learn? Mr. Oliver has lots of animals on his farm, and he likes having visitors. Sure, Greg said as he quickly tossed the rest of the kernels to the chickens. It was a warm, sunny day, perfect for being outside and exploring. As they neared Mr. Oliver's farm, Greg covered his nose with his hands. Ugh, what's that smell? That's fresh manure, Marcy proudly said, with laughter in her voice. When they arrived at Mr. Oliver's farm, they found him standing in front of the big red barn. Hi, Marcy. I'm glad you brought your foster brother with you today. You must be Greg. I'm Mr. Oliver, he said as he stretched out his arm to shake Greg's hand. I understand you would like a lesson on farm animals. Greg nodded and smiled. First, there are rules to follow when you are in my barns. No quick movements, no loud noises, and no climbing. But petting the animals is okay, said Mr. Oliver as he playfully rubbed Greg's head. Greg noticed some chickens in a nearby stall. Marcy and Greg walked over to them. Marcy explained, a boy chicken is called a rooster. They make a cockle-doodle-doo sound. They usually have a large red comb on the top of their heads. A girl chicken is called a hen. They make a soft cluck and buck-buck sound. Baby chickens are called chicks. That's right, said Mr. Oliver. Turkey hens start to lay eggs, which are larger than chicken eggs, when they are about 8 months old. They produce about 2 eggs a week. If a turkey hen sat on her egg, it would take about 28 days for the egg to hatch. In comparison, a chicken hen begins to lay eggs when she is about 5 months old. Chicken hens typically produce 1 egg almost every day, and it only takes about 21 days for a chicken egg to hatch. What's the red skin that hangs from a turkey's neck called? Greg asked as he returned to the turkeys. That's called a wattle, explained Mr. Oliver, as he petted one of the toms. Only the toms have them, so that's an easy way to tell a tom from a hen. The flap of loose skin that hangs over a turkey's beak is called a snood. The snood turns bright red when a turkey is angry, so you don't want to be around turkeys when that happens. Greg, did you know that most birds don't have teeth? They swallow their food without chewing it, said Marcy. Greg found that hard to believe. He looked at Mr. Oliver, and then he turned to Marcy. How did your chickens eat the corn I fed them? He asked. They just swallowed the pieces, said Marcy. Mr. Oliver explained. They release extra saliva, which makes the food easier to swallow, and then their digestive system breaks it down. Most importantly, all poultry need fresh, clean water 2 times a day to stay healthy. Oh, Greg was amazed. Do you know how turkeys and chickens sleep? Mr. Oliver asked Greg. Greg shrugged his shoulders. No, they prefer to sleep perched on roosting posts, where they feel safe from predators like coyotes, foxes, and raccoons. All the roosting posts in here are the same height, because if they were different, the birds would fight over the tallest pole, and then the pecking order would really show. Do you know what a pecking order is? No, not really, said Greg. At school, you have a principal, teachers, and students, right? That's a pecking order. Oh, so the leader's at the top, replied Greg. That's correct, said Mr. Oliver. It's pretty much the same with animals. Let's move on. As they walked to the next barn, Mr. Oliver said, I bet you know what's on the other side of this door. Moo! Moo! I do a pretty good cow, too. Greg looked up at Mr. Oliver and smiled. Cows, he said with excitement in his voice. Mr. Oliver looked at Greg and smiled. You're half right, Greg. Cows are girls. These are my cattle. Cattle means more than one. A bovine is one. Marcy pointed to the young bovine and said, a baby is called a calf, a boy is called a bull, and a girl is called a cow. It takes about 9 months for a dairy cow to birth a calf. Mr. Oliver added, in addition, a steer is a castrated bull, which means it can't father a calf. In general, steers are easier to handle than bulls, and their meat tastes much better. An old steer is called a bullock or an ox. As Marcy and Greg petted a calf, Mr. Oliver added, an interesting fact about cattle is that they can walk up steps, but they cannot walk down steps. That is because they can't bend their knees properly. Therefore, if my cattle got loose and decided to walk up some steps, they would be stuck if the only way out was to walk down. I would call that a misjudgment. Do you know what a misjudgment is? Is it when you make a mistake? Marcy answered. Yes, and it could be a disaster. A misjudgment is when you don't know better, or you didn't think something through, said Mr. Oliver. For example, he explained, a bovine can drink up to 24 gallons of water a day. So, if I didn't have enough water for them to drink, I wouldn't get much milk from the dairy cows, and the animals that didn't have enough water would become dehydrated and eventually die. I call that a disaster, don't you? Yeah, Marcy and Greg agreed. Cattle have stomachs with 4 digestive compartments that help break down what they eat, continued Mr. Oliver. Have you noticed them chewing? It looks like they are chewing gum. Well, cattle chew on their cuds almost constantly. Cud is food that returns from the stomach to the mouth to be chewed for a second time. Mr. Oliver cleared his throat. I'm glad I don't chew cud. How about you? Yuck, Marcy and Greg said in unison. On that note, Mr. Oliver chuckled, let's visit the swine barn. What's a swine? Greg asked. Let's go find out. Marcy and Greg followed Mr. Oliver. As Mr. Oliver opened the barn door, Greg announced, they're pigs. Why do you call them swine? Swine are domesticated pigs. A girl is called a sow and a boy is called a boar, explained Mr. Oliver. I keep the boar in a pen separate from the sow and her piglets because that keeps all of them happier. It takes about 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days for a sow to give birth. Marcy walked over to the mom pig to see her piglets. Greg followed. Marcy opened the bag she'd been carrying and pulled out a slice of watermelon. She turned to Mr. Oliver and asked, Can I give them a treat today? Mr. Oliver smiled. You sure can. They love watermelon. Bliss! Come here, Bliss. Bliss was lying on the dry straw. She grunted and slowly got herself up and walked to Marcy. Good girl, Marcy said as she rubbed the sow's head. Greg watched in amazement. It's okay, Greg. You can pet her too. Greg slowly put his hand on the sow's head and rubbed back and forth. Her hair feels like a hairbrush. Marcy laughed and gave Bliss the slice of watermelon. Good girl. Marcy motioned for Greg to follow her to the other pen. Derby, come here, Derby. Derby was a large boar. He was standing outside the barn in the mud. Marcy waved the slice of watermelon back and forth. When Derby saw the watermelon, he slowly walked through the mud and into the barn. Good boy, said Marcy. She and Greg petted his muddy head, and then Marcy gave the slice of watermelon to Greg. Hang on to the rind and he'll take it from you. Just don't let him take a finger off. Greg gave Marcy a nervous look, took the watermelon, and hung it by Derby's nose. As Derby moved to grab the watermelon, Greg dropped the watermelon and pulled his hand to his chest. The watermelon fell to the ground. Oops, Greg shrieked. That's okay, he'll get it, Mr. Oliver said. Pigs aren't picky eaters. Did you know pigs don't have sweat glands? Asked Mr. Oliver. That's why pigs play in water and mud on hot days. It cools them down. The mud also protects them from getting sunburned because pigs don't have much hair for protection. And, just like the other animals on the farm, it's important for them to have fresh drinking water every day. Mr. Oliver motioned for Marcy and Greg to follow him. Let's move on. This is the last barn. These animals are fun to watch. Bah, bah, meh, meh. You guys know what that is. As they entered the barn, Greg screeched, "Oh, sheep!" The flock startled and looked toward the door. Sheep are gentle, quiet animals. They get frightened by high-pitched and loud noises. Let's keep our voices low and no quick movements, said Mr. Oliver. A boy sheep is called a ram. A girl sheep is called an ewe. And a baby is called a lamb. It takes about 146 days to birth a lamb. Mr. Oliver opened the pen door. Come on, you two. Marcy and Greg slowly walked into the pen. The ewes just stood in place, chewing on their cuds and curiously watching the new visitors in their home. An interesting fact, added Mr. Oliver, is that if a sheep rolls onto its back and gets stuck in that position, it will need help to get up. If it can't right itself, the sheep can get overstressed and die. Greg walked over to a lamb and petted it. Oh, its fur is so soft. Marcy corrected Greg. It's not called fur, it's wool. Greg looked at Marcy. Oh yeah, wool. Sheep are fun to watch, especially when they frolic in the fields, said Mr. Oliver. Do you know what frolic means, Greg? Greg shrugged his shoulders. He looked confused. It's like recess at school, when you can run free and burn off energy, explained Mr. Oliver. The sheep noticed Mr. Oliver walk to the gate that led to the open field. They slowly followed him. Mr. Oliver unlocked the gate and pushed it open. The sheep streamed out of the barn. The lambs noticed the movement and the race was on. The lambs jumped and ran as if they were playing a game of tag. Marcy and Greg laughed at the frolicking youngsters. Well, said Mr. Oliver, that's the end of the tour. Just remember, if you're good to animals, they'll be good to you. I take pride in my farm and stay organized so I can work more efficiently. As you saw today, each breed of animals has different needs for food and shelter. I treat all of the animals well and keep a routine so they trust I will take care of them. What do you think, Greg? Mr. Oliver asked as they walked toward the driveway. I learned a lot today, said Greg. I like the lambs the best. The swine were a little scary to me. Other people think swine are scary too, but swine are good farm animals, replied Mr. Oliver. Mr. Oliver looked at Marcy and Greg. What do you think is the most important thing all animals need? For people to take care of them, replied Greg. That's important, said Mr. Oliver, but what is most important? Let me give you a hint. What is the most important thing people need? Marcy spoke up. Water. That's right. All living things need water. I'm grateful every day for fresh, clean water. Without water, plants, animals, and people would die, said Mr. Oliver. Water is essential for life. Mr. Oliver smiled at Marcy and Greg. He shook hands with both of them. Thank you for visiting. It was fun teaching you. Maybe next time you can help me clean the barns. Mr. Oliver winked. The end. And now it's review time with Cait. That's me.
Oh,
Hey, Farmer Dave. Back again. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Boy, I heard that book. It was terrific.
You guys, I just got a great idea. How about instead of review time with Cait, we do review time with Farmer Dave? What do you say?
That's fine with
Huh?
me.
All right. What'd you think of the book?
I thought it was great. It's all about farming, and it's exactly what my life's like every day. Heck, I want to go out and buy that book. If I had a chance, I'd buy it right now.
Thanks so much, Dave. Oh, hey, Dave, wait. You want your hat back?
Oh, sure.
Oh! I'm glad he brought that up. Excuse me. Glad he brought that up about buying the book, because good news for one of you guys, you don't have to buy it necessarily. All you have to do, if you want to win a copy of Behind the Barn Door, is comment below. I'll select a comment, and on my next episode, I'll announce the winner. Speaking of winners, if you hang out until after the credits, I will be announcing the winner of last episode's The Giver of Gifts and Light. Don't want to miss that. Make sure that you all like and subscribe so that you can see all of my future episodes, including the book that I am going to read next, remaining right here at Hungry Moon Farm. It's called Duck Duck, Two Pigs Got Stuck. Definitely don't want to miss that. Thanks so much for watching Storytime with Cait. That's me. Guys, thanks so much for sticking with me after the credits. The winner of the Giver of Gifts and Light is Dylan! Woohoo! Way to go, Dylan. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Storytime with Cait, for my awesome book. I love your shows.
Hey guys, as you can see, the pictures didn't really come out too well there. We had a little trouble with the lighting, and unfortunately we weren't able to get back out to Hungry Moon Farm. But that's okay, because if you hang around for another 15 seconds, tops, we'll be showing you the pictures. Here we go.